Hello everyone, this is Sharra Frank and I'm going to introduce you to my mosaic process. I'm calling this a quick start guide. This is our mosaic kickstart guide. So I have an introductory class that I taught over Zoom a couple weeks, well, I guess about a month ago. And it is a few hours long, but this is going to be just a quick 30-minute guide on diving into a project. So we don't always want to sit down and watch something super thorough and comprehensive, and this is an alternative, but I definitely recommend, if you have access to that class, making time for that, because that will take you even deeper into how to use these products and techniques. But in the meantime, if you are just doing a quick project with friends or your family and just want to get to it, this is going to be a great help. So if you've ordered in my shop, I have a couple bundles. I have this adhesive bundle and a grouting bundle. In the adhesive bundle, I've already opened the main baggie, but you have the two parts of this clay adhesive that I use in almost every single project, especially when I'm working with fine beads and other small materials. And when I use a lot of China, I actually switch over to a different adhesive called Thinset Mortar. This is like a cement-based adhesive that you mix with water, and then you can apply it with a little spatula, or you can put it in a baggie and squeeze it out like frosting. So that's Thinset Mortar, and that's what I would use on a project like this that is all just China and none of the intricate little beadwork like this. So epoxy clay for something like this, Thinset Mortar for something like this. Okay, and then we also have Diamond Glaze, and Diamond Glaze is a clear resin-like adhesive that you can layer over the top of your mosaic. It is water soluble, so it's not waterproof like resin, but it's very, very strong. Jewelers use it to glue different components together or to create a cabochon domed glass surface over the top of their material. So mosaic artists, I have been using this for the last few years and have really liked it, and I've been teaching with it more and more. So this is how I would use Diamond Glaze, is something like this where the mosaic is finished and I just want to go over and fill in some spaces and do some touch-ups. So I probably wouldn't grout this with a heavy sanded grout, although I could, and I used to grout all my work like this. But when I started using epoxy clay and adding color to it, I created this self-grout result. So I have the color added to the clay, and that gives us a nice backdrop behind the mosaic, so it removes the need to grout. And I've also pressed my material into it far enough where it fills in those little recessed spaces enough to give us that grouted look. But just to bring it to the next level of finished, I then apply the Diamond Glaze. And so this helps to fill in even more of the gaps while keeping it clear and clean. So for example, I'm going to hone in on this little pocket of space right there. And I'm just gonna squeeze in a bit of the glaze, and it just seeps into all the little nooks and crannies. So you might have to keep adding a little bit more until it pillows up enough to fill in that space. So right now it's a little bit like cloudy, but as it dries, it will become crystal clear. It does have a bit of a shiny surface after it dries, but it's very clean and clear and complements the rest of the mosaic. So I just go through and add a drop here and there as I see. And it's kind of like that saying that when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So you definitely want to be selective and also go over the metal here. You can go in between these seed beads. You can do as much as you'd like. When you're done using this bottle, I recommend cleaning out the little nozzle because it will dry up and clog up pretty quickly. So you'll want to put something in there to clear out that little needle point nozzle. And I figured out one day that this little wire from these flowers fits in there perfectly. So if you have a little wire like this, feel free to stick that in, or a needle, something like that. I am going to start packing in a little push pin with these in my orders to help you with this and keeping that cleared out. So that's Diamond Glaze. You can buy Diamond Glaze on Amazon, or some beach shops carry it. It's getting harder to find. It's made by a company called Judykins. So that's Diamond Glaze. Okay, so now I'm going to demonstrate the Apoxie Clay. Apoxie Clay is made by a company named Faves Studio, and they're in River Falls, Wisconsin, actually pretty close to me. I can drive right over there. And they have several products, but I've been using Apoxie Clay for the last, I would say, 6 years. I used Epoxy Sculpt for several years, probably around 13, 15 years. But now I use Epoxy Clay, and I mix tints into it to color it for my materials. And you don't need a lot to start. So this little bundle here, this is, I think, 3 ounces total. And this quantity will finish, I would say, two to 3 of this size of frame. Okay, so at my other studio, my teaching studio, I have mix all tints, and those are universal tints. Here at my home studio, I have this little catch-all tin of random paints. So here's oil paint, there's some acrylic paint in here, there's even some watercolor paint in here too. So any kind of colorant will work for this, but I find oil paint and the mix all universal tints to be the best. Okay, so I'm gonna set this aside because I have these bigger containers here. I'm just gonna take from these. When you start mixing, you want to have equal parts, and this container's been sitting around for a little while, so the part B will start to harden after a bit. I recommend only buying what you know you'll use up in about 2 to 3 months of time. Otherwise, the part B does start to harden, and it just feels like a little bit more difficult to pull out of the container. I recommend keeping a kitchen butter knife around, and that will help to dig it out so it can save your fingers some work. Okay, so we're gonna start with a marble size amount of each, part A and B. And the back of the container says that the first 2 hours of work time are easy, but I would say we only have an hour. The first hour, it's easy to work with. So you only want to mix up enough that you can use in 1 hour. So there's my equal parts. You can weigh it on a scale and measure it that way to the gram, or you can eyeball it. I usually just eyeball it, and I've never had any problems with it curing. And then I mix it. You want to mix it for about 2 minutes until it's consistent in color. So the first couple, goes at mixing it, you'll see that it still has this dry or the darker gray pulling through. So you want to keep mixing until the 2 colors are completely blended. And then you can add your tint color. So you don't want to add your tint color yet because you really want to make sure that these 2, part A and part B, are mixed thoroughly. And I like to roll it in a coil like this, and then I fold it in half, and then I roll again. And I feel like this saves my fingers and my hands some work because I mix a lot of this, and it does start to fatigue your hands. So you want to save some strength for your mosaic work, of course. So I'm a big fan with rolling coils. All right, so I think we're ready for adding the tint now. And I'm going to demonstrate today on, I have a few of these pairs in progress. I think I'll work on one of these pairs. I'll do this one since it has the smallest amount of space left. We'll see if I can finish that. Okay, so now I have this thoroughly mixed and I can add my color. It looks like on this one previously I was using like a golden color. It's a yellow, it's kind of bright. I'll probably need a little brown. I think I'll just add a little green to tone it down. It's very forgiving. You can add more color after you mix in your first round of color to adjust the outcome. So this part is pretty messy. It's going to get all over your gloves. And after you're done mixing in your color, you'll change your gloves out so that you don't get any of the paint onto your frame or mosaic material. I don't have any plan for this pair of what I'm gonna do next, but it looks like so far I have some beadwork around the perimeter, and I've used some metal gold beads and some bugle beads, some 2-cut seed beads, and then this little piece of trim is from of China. It was this trim there is now there. So this was super fun to cut because it's so thin and crisp. You can get those detailed pieces quite easily. Okay, so this is kind of a mossy, light mossy green, which I don't mind that at all. So I'm gonna go with this. Before I start mixing my adhesive, I like to make sure that I have a lot of material around me. So all my mosaic materials are spread out around me. And if you've also, if you're working from one of my bundles or kits in the shop, you likely have an assortment of material like this. So this is the neutral bundle, and it has rhinestones, glass. There's a piece of matte French tile in here. There's some mirror, some smelty, rhinestones, seed beads, and little metal pieces. So I have like a mosaic recipe that I like to follow for textures and different color variations. So in the bundles, I try to make sure I include a little bit of every part of my recipe. So this is the neutral bundle, and I could use all of this to fill in the rest of these. This could fill in all of these mosaics here. That's enough material to go that far. Now I'm gonna switch on to some clean gloves. I like to keep my direct contact in with the epoxy clay to a minimum because I did develop an allergy to epoxy sculpt after using it for almost 15 years. And so now and I was always wearing gloves too, but I think just a lot of exposure over a long period of time was the cause of that. But with epoxy clay, I wear gloves whenever I'm handling it so that I can minimize direct contact. But when I switch over to my mosaic materials, I do take my gloves off because I like to feel my materials, and I also don't want to transfer any of the residue of the clay onto my mosaic. So you can wipe it away with water or the finishing solution. The same company sells a product called Finishing Solution. I have that in my shop as well, but that will take off any of the residue that might transfer onto your materials. So if you're like really touching this up and then you touch this mirror, for example, it'll get kind of grimy, and you'll just notice the residue. So you can remove it with the solution. You'll want to do that before it dries though. So we have 1 hour to work with this before it really starts to set up hard. If you're still working with it after 1 hour, you can add a little bit of the glaze on top of the clay and then continue working. So after 1 hour, you'll notice that it's starting to lose its tackiness, but you can still press into it. So the glaze will bring back some of the tackiness for you so that you can continue working with it. But you wouldn't want to do that for too big of a section. It would work well for a smaller section. So the thickness I'm putting down here is complementing the material that's already in. But when I taught with Epoxy Sculpt and I applied the sculpt onto any surface, like a three-dimensional surface, like an ornament, or any two-dimensional surface like this, I would always say to start with the thickness of a dime and go from there. But you want at least the thickness of a dime, and then you can build it up accordingly from there. So sometimes I build it up a lot to get more of a sculpted effect. So this one is, quite high, and this one is more flush to the frame. Okay, so I'm probably not gonna finish this, but I will just get a few pieces in to demonstrate how this works. And if you're working really free and just filling in fast, you can fill in your whole little frame. If you have a little frame like this, like one of the trees or one of the other shapes, you can fill in the whole frame like this, and then just start pressing your material in. You can do random, you can do a pattern, you can be as super detailed as you want to be, or you can just go for it and see where it takes you. But you want to only spread out the clay for what you can use within an hour, and then fill in that section and then add more. So this one I probably did, the perimeter was my first hour, and then this interior part would be my second hour of work. So if I wanted to do more of this pattern, it looks like I have a little bit of that in my bundle here. So I can cut away some of that. And this is the wheel cutter, and you center the wheels over the top of your material and squeeze. So you have a lot of control with this tool. You can be as detailed or just general big cuts, or you can get in and do really precise detailed cuts. And you can cut over a box or into a bag even to catch all of your pieces as they fly around. And for beads, one end is taped. So you want to remove the tape on one end of the string, and then you anchor in your first bead, and then you press the rest in, tap it into place just to get it where you want it to be. And then you can go back and really commit it once you finish the row, but you just want to get it established first. You can cut it right here and leave the string in, or you can pull it through. So before I pull it through, I'm going to go back over the line and just commit everything into the clay. And if you imagine underneath, the clay is holding the bead about 1/4 to 1/3 of the way up. So it's really kind of hugging it into place and holding it into the mosaic. And if you feel that later you need some extra reinforcement from the outside, remember you can do the glaze over the top of the beads. Okay, now I can remove the string. I guess I'll finish this line here. Okay, remove the string. If it feels like it's catching, you can just leave it in. This is a double stringed bead, so it's a little bit tougher to pull through, but we did it and everything stayed put. So wonderful. And then you want to go back in and straighten out anything that looks out of place before you start your next row. And then with the next row, we can just echo what you've done, or you can change the direction of your material. This rhinestone has a little bit of elastic in it. So if you want to, you can stretch it out and kind of break the elastic in there if it's not cooperating with what you're trying to do. That looks good. Okay, and then let's see. I think I'll do that. Okay, so then we'll go all the way up to the top. And I do have this kind of odd gap right there, but I'm just gonna ignore that for now. And I could squish a piece of like gold mirror in there later, or I could just fill it with diamond glaze. And then we have these are fun. I got these from New York on a trip there, searching for vintage materials like this. So how many are in there? It looks like we have three of these. So maybe these would be a fun little highlight right here. I could just keep going and doing some of these little accents. These could go all the way around. This mirror could go in here. That would be beautiful. This is smalty, so you could do like a fun gradation of some different colors. So there's some of these leaves in here that would be beautiful with these sort of earthy colors. Okay, so that's the epoxy clay and beads and fine material. And then for thinset mortar, if you're doing a lot of china like this, the thinset mortar, since you probably only need about a tablespoon of this to finish a piece this size, I would scoop it out from the bag, mix it in like a little Dixie cup container with a popsicle stick, just a little bit of water at a time until it's a thick frosting consistency, and then let it sit for 5 minutes, stir it back up again, spread it out onto your frame or whatever base you're working on, and then press your china pieces into it and let it dry. And then you can grout it. The grout you mix the same way, a little bit of water until it's thick frosting or peanut butter consistency. You can add a little bit of paint to it if you want to change the color, and let it sit, stir it back up again after about 5 minutes, apply it to your mosaic, wash away with a damp sponge. You don't want your sponge to be dripping wet, and then polish and clean, and then you can put your hanger on the back. Whoops. Put the hanger on the back and then display. So that would bring you a finished piece such as this, or if you're working on a bigger one, something like this, and then you can hang and display. And that is your quick start guide, 30 minutes. We did not cover Weldbond. Weldbond is an alternative adhesive to something like Thinset. If you're just doing a plain, simple, straightforward mosaic, if you're doing a lot of just flat glass, not, dimensional texture, you could just do Weldbond straight out of the bottle, right onto your frame, let it dry, and then grout. But if you like doing the beads and the self-grouted look with the clay, this is the way. All right, I hope that was helpful. Let me know how it goes. Let me know if you have results to share. I want to see how you do, and I would love to stay connected with you.